This is the Personnel Committee meeting for the City of Green Bay on October 24th at 4:32 PM. We'll start with the roll call. Alder Johnson.
Here.
Alder Burnett.
Here.
Alder Hutchinson.
Here.
All right, everyone is here. I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye,
Aye.
and that passes unanimously. Entertain a motion on the minutes.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye,
Aye.
and that passes unanimously. On to regular business. Item 1, for consideration with possible action on the request to fill the following replacement positions and all subsequent vacancies resulting from internal transfers. Item A is a truck driver. Does anyone have any questions for staff?
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye,
Aye.
and that passes unanimously. For consideration with possible action on the implementation of the updated city plan as recommended by the Carlson-Detman Market Analysis. Staff?
So we have in the packet a report on the Carlson-Detman study. A couple weeks ago, we went through pages 1 through 3 that talked about the recommendation, which was to implement the 50th, 75th percentile plan, a COLA on April 1st, 2024, and then employees receive their annual step increase or performance range increase throughout the year. So we came back here tonight to talk about like the employee feedback and some other options for personnel. So I'm going to go to page 4 in the packet that talks about employee feedback. So for the most part, generally speaking, there's been positive feedback from employees regarding the pay plan, considering the increases employees will get January 1, and then also being placed on a lower step that will provide a higher earning potential for employees, and then employees being thankful that the city's taken a step to provide competitive wages. And then obviously there's been some concerns, as we heard that a couple weeks ago, and from other concerns from employees, which center around retention concerns. Employees in the performance range currently that are moving to the performance range of the new pay plan are not receiving an increase, and they're not feeling valued for that. And then also employees that are not feeling valued if they receive a small increase, moving on to a step, but it's a small increase during implementation, like a less than 1% increase. And then there's other employees that are concerned that they're moving down in steps and they're closer to new hires. And a question that keeps coming up is, why can't employees just stay in their current step in the new proposed pay plan? And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then there's concerns about seniority and leapfrogging, where the major one that comes up is employees that are hired within the past 3 years or so. They're moving to the minimum step or step 1, and they're all going to the same step, but they have different seniority. So what happens if you keep the same performance evaluation date, if someone was hired, just for example, if someone was hired last year in January, and then someone was hired 3 years ago in June, they'll go to the same step this January, but if you have the performance evaluation date consistent, the person hired in January last year will leapfrog the person with more seniority. So those issues are things we can address, and I do believe that the leapfrogging issue, I think, would be better to address by department and by position within the budget next year, and not necessarily with the whole pay plan discussion. But we can talk more about that later. So when I say, generally speaking, employees have been positive, I think for the most part they have been positive. It doesn't mean that every employee doesn't have some concern. I think they do. It's not a perfect plan, but for the most part, when someone expressed their concern and it was addressed, they said, I get that, I understand, overall it's a positive plan. So that's when I say, generally speaking, it's been positive. It has been. So then on page 5, I go through the Carlson-Detman implementation options. So what we have outlined is 4 options that we reviewed and that were potential options for us to pursue. So the first option is called increase to the minimum. So what that means is we have about 158 employees that are lower than the minimum step on the new proposed pay structure. So 158 employees will be going to step 1, or the lowest step in each pay grade. If we did this option, those employees would move up, but then every other employee that's within a step or on that structure, they may be in between steps, and they would stay in those in-between steps until their performance evaluation, then they would move up. So that's the least expensive option, where only the people who are below the pay grade minimum, only those individuals would get an increase January 1, and that'd be a cost of $590,000. We didn't think that was the best option, so we did not go with that because we wanted to make sure everyone received a increase on January 1. So that was option number 2, which is where each employee will be placed on a step of the appropriate pay grade that provides at least an increase. That's for the employees in the step part of the pay plan. And then the employees that are higher than the control point in the performance range would not receive an increase. So that cost is about a $900,000 cost on January 1, and that was what was proposed 2 weeks ago. So another option that we'll go through in more detail in the alternative proposals is that it's called a guaranteed above the base 1% increase, then increase to a step. So in this situation, you take everyone's base wage, which is on December 31st of the end of this year, you increase it 1%, and then you place them on a step that provides an increase. So employees in the performance range that were not getting an increase under option 2, they'd be getting at least a 1% increase in this option. And then the fourth one is the compression relief model, or guaranteed above the base 2%. This is where employees would be placed on the step based upon their longevity and years of service, and then employees in the performance range would receive a 2% increase. So that would be, I think across the board, it's about an 8% increase, but for most employees, I think it'd be closer to 11%, and that implementation cost is about $2.4 million. So that would be adding about $1.5 million to what we're discussing today. So that's why that option wasn't chosen, because of the cost of it. And tonight, we're basically going to be talking about options 2 and 3 with alternative proposals. So on the next page, page 6, we have 4 proposals. The first one is where we take that 1% guaranteed increase to the employee's base wage. So like I said before, you take someone's wage on 12/31, you add 1% to it, and then you put them on a step. And then, so that means employees in the performance range will be getting a 1% increase on January 1, and then we still provide the 2% COLA on April 1st of 2024. We then would like to change the performance range increase from, gotta let someone in and Zoom. Then we would change the performance range increase from 1% to 2%, and that'd be for all employees. So the additional cost for this is about $200,000 from what was proposed 2 weeks ago. What this does is it ensures, like I said, everyone in the performance range receives an increase, and then it's also at least an increase of 1% for employees on the step portion of the new pay plan. And then going forward, those in performance range would be receiving a 2% increase, which is closer to a step increase in the pay plan. And the proposal 2 weeks ago had a minimum annual wage increase of 3%. This now would go to 5%. So the alternative proposal 1A, I think Alder Johnson asked for what the cost would be if the COLA got moved up closer to January 1. So you take everything I just went through, but you move the COLA up to the second pay period in January, or second pay period of the year. You'll get an additional cost of about $335,000. So now alternative proposal number 2, this is where we have the same implementation that we proposed 2 weeks ago, that everyone gets at least an increase on the pay plan, and then those in the performance range would not receive an increase on January 1, but we would like to, in this proposal, have a 3% COLA in the second pay period of 2024, and then again with the performance range increase from 1% to 2%, that would be about a $590,000 increase. So this proposal, it provides a larger COLA for all employees throughout the year, and then it also brings the minimum annual wage increase from 3% to 5%. It just does not address the concern of having everyone get at least a 1% increase from January 1. And then alternative proposal number 3 is essentially 1 and 2 combined, where you give everyone at least a 1% increase January 1. You have a 3% COLA that starts the second pay period of 2024, and then you have a performance range increase to 2%. And this additional cost is about $790,000. And then the rest of the packet has the distribution. So if you look at page 7, with the guaranteed 1% increase for everyone, you can just see, compared to just the increase to the step, that about 96 employees are moving from less than 1% or no increase up to 1% or more increase. And then there's some other examples, just how the implementation works. and then some examples of the recruitment. So if there's any questions or anything I can help clarify, I'd be happy to do so.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Chief Falls?
I have a question. You mentioned the step, and then there's the COLA. What's the main difference? I guess, is there advantages of being, the step versus the COLA?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking, is there an advantage to moving someone January 1 to a different step as compared to having the same step that was proposed 2 weeks ago and having a higher COLA?
Yes.
So I think what the advantage would be is when you have a higher COLA, it will impact all the employees, and it also will increase our pay structure by 1%, which makes it more competitive. So when you look at our step plan of 7 steps and then the performance range, if an employee is in step 2 and they get a 3% COLA, they obviously see a 3% increase to their step 2, but steps 3 and above also go up 3%. So that's the advantage to doing a COLA, higher COLA as compared to moving someone in a step along the way.
So if someone gets moved in a step, that's forever. I mean, that's a step up for a long time. A COLA is a one-time deal, right?
Yeah, a COLA will be a one-time deal, but it's also increasing every step of your pay plan. So
For
that's
this.
why it's helpful, yeah.
Okay.
Alder Burnett?
Chief Faltz, the mayor's proposed budget is now publicly available. There's an open house a couple days from now. The budget presented to us includes the plan that is being recommended by the mayor and staff. Is that correct?
The budget includes what was proposed 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yep. It doesn't include any of these alternative options. So the costing for these options is you take the mayor's proposed budget and you add the approximate cost to it.
Of about $900,000 to implement. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe I can clarify that. So what was proposed 2 weeks ago was the option 2 on, let's see here, it was on page 5, number 2. So that was, like I said, the implementation cost is about $900,000. That's already included in the mayor's proposed budget, to be clear on that.
All right, thank you.
Joe, and this actually, we might jump one committee early here. I got a question for Director Ellenbecker. The mayor's proposed budget, I haven't had a chance to review it entirely relative to the preliminary meeting that we had. But when we evaluate levy limits, where is his proposal relative to where the levy cap is?
Oh.
As you know, this will take us up about $1.5 million over a previous levy. However, we will not hit our capacity on the levy limits because of the debt adjustment. That still leaves us another about $3 million adjustment that we can take on that adjustment.
Because of the shared revenue?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
What's the 3 million?
You can, what happens is you have your debt levy, I'm sorry, you have your levy, and then you are allowed to take adjustments for the amount of your debt that's included in your budget. And so every year we've been taking a portion of that adjustment. So as our debt is around $10 million, we're up to about $6 million of that adjustment we're taking. So it gives us more capacity to go over what's allowed for the calculation for the levy increase.
Okay.
So we still have capacity, and so, yeah, we are not using up the whole capacity.
Okay, so unlike last year where we were kind of pushing up against that capacity, right, originally, I mean, I think this gives us wiggle room to even have this discussion.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Burnett?
Thank you, Chair Gelman. This is either for Chief Faltz or Director Grenier. You know, all city positions are important, keeps the city functioning, but over the past few years, there are a couple positions that really caught my eye, and that perhaps they're either too low paying or that we were not competitive in other ways. One would be a lot of the engineering positions in your department, Director Grenier, and then the other for some of the drivers, you know, plow drivers, sanitation, When I think of those positions, would this plan, in your opinion, address some of the concerns that we have had as a city government in finding and retaining those harder to fill positions?
Yeah. So I can address that. On page 9, it kind of gives a pretty good overview. It has some recruitment examples, and it has a current open position. I know this isn't a truck driver, but the same, I guess, principle kind of goes with it. Our current open position, we have a DPW laborer right now, and our current posting starts at $21.60. Under the new pay plan, I believe that would go up to 24. Let me make sure I have that. I might add a typo there. Yeah, so under the new pay plan, we'd be going from $21.60 currently to $24.68. So it's a $3 increase that we'd be posting. So, I mean, it's not a silver bullet, but I do believe that puts us in a much better position. And with our, we did do a market assessment for engineers this past year that gave them a bump. And generally speaking, most employees that would have received a reclass in past like 2-3 years are seeing a smaller increase with the new pay plan because they're probably closer to the new target market that we have, the 50th, 75th percentile. But I think engineers are probably seeing another increase in this one because we've talked about the pay has been low at that. So I think it's addressing both those positions. So I think it's a step in the right direction.
Director Grenier, where are you at with staffing levels for some of those positions? We're a month away from snowfall. I mean, is this, even with the increased rate, are you going to have trouble or issues recruiting enough workers to fill these positions?
Well, we've got some deficiencies in operations at the truck driver position and or labor position. Those, in a market like we have right now, those historically have been challenging to keep filled. The truck driver position in and of itself has been probably one of the ones that has changed the most in my tenure as director. That was a very highly sought position at one time because the primary job function that separates the 23 laborers from the 16 truck drivers is those 16 are the first ones called out on spreading and plowing operations. Just the dynamic of the workforce, we're seeing folks who don't necessarily, we're not unique in this, speaking with my counterparts at police and fire, we're seeing similar phenomenons in the workforce where the work-life balance has changed. And you can throw all the overtime in the world you want at somebody. At some point, they get burned out and they want to spend time at home with their families as opposed to making overtime. And I think that's what we're seeing here. That's one of the challenges we're facing there. So again, as Operations Manager Falls has indicated, I think this is a step in the right direction. I don't know that that's going to be the be-all, end-all cure. From a staff engineer perspective, we're sitting okay right now. The bigger problem I actually have is in mid-management. I have an assistant city engineer position that has been open since June, and I have a traffic engineer that's been open for 2 months.
Right.
And we're just not getting candidates.
So, thank you for that. Director Grenier, or Chief Falls, this is more of a philosophical, overall, the way I see this is that, as I stated, all the city positions are important, right? There are some positions that are harder to fill that are very critical to operating our city. That would be plow drivers, people that get the call. And when you see some of these, as Director Grenier said, this work-life balance that at a wage that they're currently at, for them to, chances are, if they have a spouse or partner that also has employment, it puts a lot of stress and a lot of demands on those folks who wake up in the middle of the night and respond to a first snowfall or ice or whatever it is. And when I say that all city positions are important, there are some positions in our city that have very little turnover, meaning that there are a lot of people in those positions that like higher pay grade, not public works, but say professional positions, say city clerk, a lot of the professional staff level positions in offices, all very important still. But will we be better off, again, knowing that the wage study is a proposal from the professionals, allocating more money to some of the critically needed positions that we're having a hard time recruiting and keeping people in versus some of the professional positions where we have less turnover? Still important, but I want to make sure that they're the professionals, they're the consultants, that we're not overly rigid in how we're applying it, that we should put some of the money towards the critically important positions with the life-work balance. Because if a spouse or partner also has a job and the employee has to wake up in the middle of the night and just drop everything to respond, sure, they sign up for that, that's the job, but also we have to be mindful of the demands that places on the family, because we've done that in other positions like firefighters, for example. That's a lot. Could you just kind of respond? Like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I guess the first thing I would say is, I can do a little bit more digging, but I guess I won't be as quick to say that we haven't had turnover in the higher level positions. I mean, we just recruited 3 director positions in the past year and a half. Steve was talking about, he has a upper level mid-management position he's looking to recruit. We had a deputy, finance director. So I mean, there's turnover, I think, across the board. But I think what you're talking about and proposing, for me, I think the most important thing is to implement the pay plan that's proposed. And I think if you want to address some of those positions that are more difficult to recruit, and maybe some of those positions, for example, snow plowing or snow plowing operations, I think there's ways within this proposed pay plan to do so. So I think that, to me, is probably the most important, is I think getting this proposed pay plan in place, because it's 11% increase every step across the board, and then addressing some of those more difficult positions to recruit.
So let's just say the budget includes $900,000 increase, right? That's what's included in the budget. If that's what the appetite is, let's just say, from the mayor and the council, within that $900,000, is there some flexibility to take from one pot of higher wage workers and put towards some of the lower wage workers that are very important to the operation of the city?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's hard to explain, but the implementation for each position on January 1, with what's proposed right now, there is not a real rhyme or reason who gets a bigger increase when it's implemented versus who doesn't. There's positions that are in lower pay grades that might see a 8% increase January 1. There's positions on the higher pay grades that might see a 1 to 2% increase. So it's not necessarily you just take, it's not like there's higher paid positions getting more money January 1 or getting more money during the implementation, because that just isn't true. It's based upon where you're at in comparison to the pay plan and where you're at in comparison to the new pay plan that's being proposed. So it's not as simple as saying we can take less money from higher paying jobs and just shift it down, because there's lower paying jobs that are getting higher increases than higher paying jobs. So I think like I said before, the better way to address it would be to try and find additional funds to address those issues. Because, and maybe I can just answer this too, I think what was budgeted as a placeholder for new positions, and I think it's in the budget book, was about $1.5 million. So that's what's within what's proposed. So the $900,000 is an estimate of the implementation on January 1, but it's not a 2024 cost of the plan, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Alder Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Joe, how much did we pay for this study?
I think it was about between 30 and 35,000, and there's still some additional costs that'll come in, but I don't believe it will exceed 40,000, and we put aside 50,000 to pay for the study.
Okay, and it just, and I want us, to recall why we asked for this, and several of us have been asking for this for many years. I think I have a stronger appreciation now of why we were unable really to do it in the past, and, but at the end of the day, it was about getting us to that 50th percentile. We could sense that some positions weren't there anymore. And that's been the policy in the past. I don't mean to suggest that that's got to be our policy in the future. And of course, you've got a 50-75, proposal in here. But the attempt was to equalize all positions, right? And so I just have a strong hesitancy to deploy a rob Peter to pay Paul scenario, because I don't think that leverages why we paid to get the study in the first place. So, but I also do believe that we have a very unique opportunity in front of us with shared revenue, with kind of what Diana shared with us, which is this opportunity to make a really positive stride forward to correct some of the imbalances that do perhaps exist right now with some of our positions. And I appreciate you pulling together those numbers, on adjusting maybe the timing of when raises occur. I think that gives us, a really important point to contemplate. In last year's budget cycle, we did move the timing of that up. Council members may remember that. We filled that with ARPA, but of course it creates a structural gap that we then have to fill moving forward. And I'm glad we did that, and I'm comfortable that we did that. Moving that up, though, it just requires that level of contemplation, of course, that it's not just impacting first quarter 2024, it's impacting first quarter of 25, 26, 27, and on and on. So we just have to be willing to accept that. And I'm willing to entertain that. But I think from a timing perspective, and I'm trying to get at the heart of, we had a really good discussion around this last time. We asked you to come back with some new numbers, and you've done that. What is your expectation of this today? Are you expecting Personnel Committee to say adopt Plan XYZ, or are you anticipating that the budget's already been proposed, that's the proposal on the table, it's really up to the budget process to alter it if we want it altered, right? Like which path are we going here?
I think it's up to the committee, and I think you could do either one, right? I mean, I think the committee could pick a proposal right now. You don't have the full budget in front of you, so that might be more difficult to do. The committee could talk about maybe proposals they feel more comfortable with, or they could just refer, probably to the budget, the Joint Personnel Finance Committee, and talk about it more. So I think those are all on the table.
Yeah, and that's my point, right? So from a procedural perspective, right, we can make all the motions we want on this today, but the budget proposal book is out, so we can't change it. And of course, we have a lot of individuals here, and I think we're gonna get to the point where we open the floor and have that opportunity to listen to folks that will help inform and guide our decision-making up here, which is really important. But I also wanna maybe kind of set the table with appropriate expectations that there's probably little that we're gonna decide on tonight. It'll still come at a future meeting, but this is a really important step, obviously, to get the information we need to kind of make the right decisions. That be a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I was gonna touch on, you talked about the two options that Carlson Denman proposed. And they did propose a 50th percentile, which the city has went to in 2017. And then we've been trying to get there, or maybe go higher. So we recommended the 50th and 75th percentile to try and get ahead of the 50th percentile market a little bit. When you look at the implementation for either plan, it's pretty close to the same numbers. It's just people on the higher plan will go lower in steps. So I think this plan that we're recommending has more earning potential down the road. So that's part of the reason why. So if someone's kind of like, well, we could implement the 50th percentile and save more funds, it's not going to work that way. It's going to be about the same cost either way.
Should we open the floor?
Sure. Entertain a
Motion to open the floor to hear from interested parties?
Need a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. We'll need you to come up one at a time to the podium over here. We'll need your name and your address, and then your comments. Usually we say between 3 and 5 minutes. So try and keep it in there so everyone here who wants to speak can speak. Do we have anyone on Zoom that's asking to speak at this time? No? All right. All right, so whoever wants to go up first? Anybody? Come on.
Like you're up, Mark.
Mark Berglund, 806 North Broadway. Being the leadoff guy again, someday I'd like to be the closer. So, anyway, you know, we know we're behind on wages. You know, while the surrounding municipalities were giving 5% or more COLA, we were doing 1%, 2%, and 3% for the last few years, hence the market assessment. COLA, in my opinion, is the big equalizer. You know, you keep up with COLA, we don't have this problem. 6 years ago, we had a wage study. 6 years later, we're in the same spot. The wage plan ensures, this proposed wage plan ensures that 5 to 6 years from now, we'll be doing the same thing again. And the last meeting that we had last Thursday tells us so. We were told every 5 to 7 years, we should be doing a wage study. And what that does, well, and case in point, you know, we implemented a 7-year wage study 5 years ago, we're right back there again. A while ago, we were told they were budgeting for the 5% cost of living. My thought at the time was, great, the city's finally doing something big and bold to handle this situation. All good. Then we're told it's 2%. Then I was told that the 5% was never a consideration, never discussed, wouldn't work, a bad idea, and short-sighted, is what I was told. So, I'll drop the 5% right now. There's some good things in this plan, like increasing the starting wage. That I think is great. I think that'll do a lot for getting new people in. But now we have 3 or 4 alternative proposals to add to that. So obviously, there was some flaws in addition to the good. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to have 3 or 4 revisions. So here we are again. Other municipalities are giving 5% COLA again. De Pere is going to do 5%. Schools, I think they budgeted for 8%, but they're going to do 5%. So, you know, when we do the 1%, 2%, and 3%, and everybody else is doing 5%, we're never going to catch up. And, you know, having these 7-year plans just ensures that we'll never catch up. At some point in time, you've just got to catch up and maintain. So, last night I had a discussion with the facility supervisor from Door County. Door County just did a Carlson-Detman study. Their adjustments for next year are starting out at 4% and going up to 12%, all happening this year. Door County is going to hire in the 87th percentile. And these were all the recommendations from Carlson-Detman, and they're doing exactly what they had recommended. Obviously, Door County's got a deep well of money, which we don't. But that being said, one of the other points here is, you know, I had heard that all jobs in the city are important. You know, are they equally important? You know, I'm not too sure, but, you know, things like, specifically, and they're important, but Green Bay City Police and Fire, what have they gotten for increases in the last 3 years? The unions, no doubt, have gotten a better deal for them than the rest of the city employees. Why are we treated differently? You know, in 2021, we got a 1% cost of living. Do you think police and fire got that? You know, I don't know. Can anybody tell me what they have been getting for raises? Obviously, you know, us people here, you know, we're not arresting criminals. We're not saving your house from fire. But I think at some point in time, we're just as important. Start looking at things like close the park department. What happens? What happens to the quality of life in Green Bay? No Bay Beach, no pools, no parks, no public restrooms. You know, like I say, we're not arresting criminals. We're not keeping your house from fire, but I think we're important. What if the Department of Public Works didn't plow snow? Didn't pick up your garbage? Where are we gonna be then? Why are we be treating differently than the union entities? And I think that's maybe because you can. You know, the unions, they dictate what they do, you bargain with them, they get what they ask for or close to. And we try to ask for something and, you know, we don't get nearly what we ask for. Some other things, like in the proposal, some things that are stated but aren't exactly quite clear. Now, I'm off notes here, so bear with me. Proposal 3 says a 6% increase. But in my opinion, to get that 6% increase, it is the COLA, it is the initial bump, and then it is your performance review. Now, anybody that works for the city more than 5 years, their performance review is in December. So, yeah, you may get that 6% increase for 1 month of the year, because part of that 6% increase is your performance review. And everybody that worked for the city before the last wage study gets their performance review, to my knowledge, on December 1st. So it may be 6% at the end of the year, but you've worked 11 months to get there. Also, like, and this is in my opinion, they say that this wage study, the original wage study, if implemented, raises everybody's wage 11%. Is that over the course of 7 years? Is that where the 11% comes from? I mean, that's the questions I have. So it's not like you're gonna get 11% this year, it's 11% over 7 years, if that's the case. And if that is the case, then obviously we're going to be behind again. So, that's about all I got at this point. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for our speaker? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Is there anyone else interested in speaking?
Paul Milozova, N3592, Cudlitz Road, Luxembourg. First of all, it's never easy following Mark. If you weren't sitting so close, I'd have probably got up here before you. But I would like to first of all thank Joe for taking the time. We've had multiple discussions, and obviously a significant amount of time has been invested in this. We've had some person-to-person meetings and multiple phone calls that have gone back and forth, and I think he's done an admirable job trying to put something together in addition to what was proposed by Carlson Detman. As he stated, the plan's not perfect. The complexities of city finance, and especially when you're dealing with 460 employees and trying to group everybody into the same categories, can be very difficult. So he's acknowledged that he's willing to look at some individual things, you know, outside of this. But let me give you some simple statistics. Asked for a list of names of employees who have left within the last handful of years or so. This is just from the operations division of the Department of Public Works. There are approximately 27 that we have lost. 17 of those went to other municipalities. We gained 3 from other municipalities. At some point in time, don't we want to be the municipality who's stealing from others, where these employees come to us trained instead of having to train them? The additional costs that we incur in training new employees can exceed $10,000. Most of the new employees that we're getting now do not come with a CDL. There's approximately 125 hours invested in training a new employee to get a CDL. That doesn't include the onboarding and some of the other stuff that gets included. It's simple training like the CDL, forklift training, safety training, those types of activities. I appreciate your idea with stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. We're not here to advocate necessarily for that. I understand that while it's an easy target to look at, you know, someone who's making six figures versus somebody who's making, 45 to 50,000. We're advocating for something that's fair, something that's a livable wage. If I ask for a show of hands, I'll bet you that easily the majority of people behind me would be working a second job, just trying to get by. This is a small step in the right direction. Discussions have been great. They've been quality discussions. This is a problem that's been in the works for a significant number of years. The hole has been dug so deep that this is not something that's going to be resolved in 1 year. This has to be a continued process, and it's not just about salaries. It's about equipment and other things that have been ignored and overlooked within the Department of Public Works. Okay, so we appreciate that we've at least been heard at this point, and yeah, you guys have some difficult decisions to make. Some money is going to have to be spent, but we need to be the leader in this. We can no longer train people to go to other municipalities. Okay, thank you.
Next speaker?
Todd Lackey, 2426 Forestville Drive. I'm in my 25th year of service for the city of Green Bay, all in DPW. First question is, the original pay thing that was proposed 2 weeks ago was basically putting at us 50%. I don't know why we want to be at 50%. Doesn't make any sense. Nobody wants to be at 50% anywhere in their life that I know of. And I think everybody here, if the Packers are 50% win-loss season, everybody's gonna be mad. But anyways, and to go back to what's in the budget and what was proposed 2 weeks ago, somebody in their 25 years of service, first of the year is gonna get 11-cent raise. Other people, quite a bit more, and I don't wanna take that away from them. I wanna be with them. And so I don't want that to get lost of what's being already in the budget. And I think, with the new proposals that are out here, I think make that more justified and put everybody in a more level playing field. So I would hope some of those do get really looked at. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir, could you stay there a second? Alder Burnett?
Would you be willing to answer a question?
Pardon me?
Would you be willing to answer a question?
Absolutely.
So, first of all, thanks for your service to the city. That's great. Thank you. Over your 25 years, was it in the same position or within the same department? In
Correct.
the city,
Yes.
Department of Public Works?
Yes.
Okay. How has the job or the demands on the staff changed over the years? Like, what I mean by that is understanding the equipment, the skill that's needed, the types of equipment that you're operating. What have you noticed over the last 25 years that have led you to this point?
Well, one of the hardest part is the age of our fleet and our equipment. Makes it, when it gets old, the older it gets, the harder it is to find. I'm in the parts, so I buy the inventory parts for all the equipment. Makes it very difficult when you're trying to find parts for a piece of equipment that's 20, 30 years old versus something, under 5, 10 years old. And with the pandemic a few years ago with COVID, a lot of, I don't know what all it was, but the availability of certain parts, and it would change from month to month. I don't know if manufacturers just not manufacturing, made it very difficult even to find replacement parts. And then, just, I think even being understaffed, they look for your more help. And another topic is, we look at our truck drivers here that are up in the middle of the night plowing snow, and they're not the only ones. I'm in when they do that. There's the supervisors are in. There's a lot of people in losing their sleep to do their job for the city, and it is what we signed up to do, but it isn't just something that's real easy.
So you started in the late 90s. At that time, based on your understanding of where you were compared to your peers in other municipalities, was Green Bay kind of considered a higher paying position compared to other municipalities in the late 90s?
From what I was told when I applied for my position, there was 300 or more people that applied for it, and I had to test for it. So there was always, I can't say always, but my first 15 years, we had all the same mechanics and shop helpers. In the last 15 years, the door's been revolving. Just revolving. And you see it with the street laborers, you see it with sanitation. When I first started, I had to learn, 100 and some people's first name, let alone everybody had a nickname. Now I'm just trying to get caught up in everybody's first name.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, sir.
Anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to close the floor if no one else wants to speak.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Comments? Alder Hutchinson?
Is the assessment that the base that we're looking at, the $900,000 that's in the budget, is that based on a 50%? I just want to make that clear. What's it based on?
So, what is in the budget is the proposed pay plan is the 50th and 75th percentile. And what was allocated for increase in salaries as a projection, that includes the $900,000 implementation costs, and that is in the budget at this time. So there's, the $900,000 for option 2 is already within the budget at this point.
Okay. And then, so there's three alternative proposals stated, which I think is what we're thinking about. Potentially, each one has an additional cost. Proposal 1 has two costs, $200,000 and then $335,000. Is the $335,000 for 1A, do you add that to the $200,000?
Yeah, that's a really good question. No, that's just total.
That's total.
Yeah.
So if
you-
we, okay, so if we do everything in alternative proposal 1 and 1A, the total increase would be $335,000.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, and then the increase for proposal 2 would be $590,000.
Yeah.
And then the increase for proposal 3 would be a total of $790,000. Okay, thank you.
Alder Johnson?
Joe, obviously, I think, one of the struggles that we have is we're trying to almost create this apples to apples comparison, right? Like what's happening with maybe other municipalities versus what's happening with Green Bay. But we're really not talking about an apples to apples situation here. So if we're trying to create some parity, if you will, around the discussion, if we were today to say, you know what, we're gonna do away with the survey, we're not listening to anything in here, and we're just gonna do a 5%, what would the financial impact of that look like? I'm not suggesting we do that, but I'm trying to, create an even discussion level here.
Yeah, so I think if you did it depends when the 5% goes into effect. But I think if you did have 5%, it'd be very close to what we have in the budget right now. And I think the consequences of that is, on the last page, excuse me. If you look at page 9 of the packet, where it talks about our current open positions and then what the new posting would be under the new pay plan, you basically, right now, those positions are going up $3 for your posting. You just cut that in half for the new posting is what you would do. So I think that would be the concern of doing that. And then I think the concern is in order to get to that 11% increase for every step in the new proposed pay plan, you then would have to have like a 5-6% COLA next year. So that's why I think it's a very short-term
Right, yeah, and
solution.
I'm not suggesting we do
Yep.
that. I'm trying to create a fiscal comparison.
Yep.
Right? And so, right now, with the proposal that is on the table, which of course includes the adjustments, we're showing a $900,000 impact. Right?
It's closer, I believe, to like 1.5 when you include the step increases and everything, right? Yeah, so I can explain the implementation cost. So January 1, you take your current wage, and then you go to the wage in the new proposed plan. Let's say it's $20 on December 31st, and then January 1, you're getting $21. You take that $1 times 2,080 hours that people are working, you get a number, you do that for every single person, that is the cost right there. So what's in that's the implementation cost, so the overall cost over the year is a little higher than that when you include the increases in the steps, things like that.
Okay, so, and I just want to understand clearly, if we said no study, we're just going to do a 5% raise across the board, you're thinking that's approximately how much?
I think it's like 1.5 million.
Okay, so whether we do 5% or we implement the study that you're proposing here, we're at roughly the same amount, it's just that some folks are impacted differently. So in aggregate, same number, but individually, certain positions are getting impacted differently.
That's an accurate statement,
Okay,
yeah.
because I'm trying to get really at the heart of what, where the source of, maybe hurt or unfairness is coming into play, right? And I just kind of want to make it really simple for us. And that really is attributed, because what we're trying to do is, if you've got outliers up here or outliers down here, meaning paid high, paid low, we're trying to bring them to the equilibrium, right?
Yeah,
That's ultimately the goal?
So what the consultant is providing is a new proposed pay structure that is at the 50th and 75th percentile. That's what that is. The intent is not to give anyone an increase, it's to place them at that target market. So the increase I see is based on the COLA that the council wants to provide. The issue with that is that there's a cost to implementing the plan and there's a cost to the COLA. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at,
Yep.
right? So we're kind of dealing with two different issues, and they have two different cost structures. And so when we're looking at the cost of, so you're 1.5 million total, you said. So really, the cost of the COLA is about the 600,000, and then the plan implementation is the 900,000? Is that how you would kind of split that up?
Let's see.
If you're,
Yeah, I think that's close.
okay.
Yeah.
Alder Eck?
Mark had asked a question, so I thought it would be maybe helpful if you explained the 11% increase.
Yeah, I can explain that. So if you take our our current pay plan, and you just go at the control point, which is step 7, and I'm pretty sure it's across the board, you can do it for every step as well. You take the control point, you add 11% to that, that is what the new control point is for the new proposed plan. So that is where the pay plan gets changed, and then where people get implemented or they get placed on the structure isn't 11% increase. It's based upon your placement. So some people are, like it's outlined in page 7, most people are between 2 and 4.9%, some people are above 5%. So, the 11% across 7 years, I think that really comes down to, the COLA discussion as well. I think you can get more than 11% from your wage today if the COLA is higher down the road. So it increases the pay structure by 11%.
Joe, I'm having a hard time understanding the 50 to 75, okay? So we want to be between 50 and 75 with this proposal. This will get every employee somewhere between 50% and 75%.
So what this proposal does is it takes our current pay structure and it moves us to the 50th, 75th percentile blend pay structure. So what that means is our control point, step 7, will be at the midway point between 50 and 75%, which is like 62.5. So that is control point, step number 7. What it does then is it puts every employee on the pay structure. So if you're below step 7, you're below that 50th, 75th percentile. If you're in the performance range, you're above that. And that's the same as our current pay plan, except our current pay plan right now, step 7, is the 50th percentile. So if you're below step 7, you are below the market rate.
Okay. And so if we maintain this for 7 years, we will be up about 11%. Is that what you're saying, roughly?
So I wish I was more of a mathlete than an athlete, but so with, if you take every step in our pay structure, currently, it goes up 11%.
Okay.
So I'm not the math genius to figure out when it takes you to get 11% from your current wage to get 11% increase, but I don't think you need to wait 7 years to get 11% increase. Like, you might have to wait 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, to get to the control point, which is gonna be the target market, but that control point is going to change based on the COLA we do each year.
Well, and that, to me, seems like the problem, is the COLAs haven't been keeping up. And that lowers the value of the wage they're making if we're not staying up with the COLA. And I mean, that's just, it's the way it's been. And so how do we address that? I mean, that's a year-to-year thing, and that has to be the policy of the city, the mayor and the council, to maintain those COLAs, to keep these employees up within that bracket that we want to try and be up at.
Yeah, I mean, it's really gonna come up to the council every single year for that decision. But I think what I was talking about with Alder Johnson is, when we increase our pay structure by 11%, the proposal, that is a very good thing, and it kind of solves the COLA issue for a couple of years because it increases our pay structure up 11% already. Whereas if you do a 5% for 2024, you essentially got to do a 5 or 6% in 2025. Now, employees, if you did a 5% across the board next year, I think some might see bigger increases, but you're then short-sighted in that you are not looking at the long-term recruitment you're looking at recruiting at a lower wage. I'm sure that's as clear as mud.
All right. Well, no, I know. It's difficult understanding the finances,
Yeah.
which is why I was neither an athlete nor a mathlete, so. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Alder Hutchinson.
That was my essence of my first question. The plan, okay, if we call it the plan and the steps, that's a step up based on numbers of years of service and job. See, I'm having a problem jiving COLA with that. It seems to me, if I'm on this pay plan, I want the plan step to go up because it's there forever. I mean, it's there. I'm on the step. I'm going up. The COLA is just the one-time deal. I mean, every year we got to look at the COLA. So if the step is so what you just said just now made sense to me because the step assures an increase by itself with no COLA.
Yep.
The COLA is trying to bring the salaries up to the, the higher prices and whatever we pay for everything. So it's trying to address that. So this plan, let's call it the 900,000, does the step, and then we're looking at a COLA. And then these other proposals are adding on to that.
That's
Okay,
it.
I just want to, okay. But the important feature is the plan is going to help every year. Okay. I'm sorry, it's just my first time going through this where we're changing the plan, and now we got COLA. You know, I want to do the right thing, so, thank you.
Looks like Alder
Chief?
Stoyer has his hand raised.
Sure, put them on.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, very good discussion. You know, I've gone through, a number of us have gone through a number of budgets over the years, and, you know, usually it's the 1% to 2% that, you know, has been brought forward. I've been trying to wrap my mind around the 5% that's been brought forward, even though it's not definitive. But I think with anything like this, or even development projects that I've seen in the past, a lot of people want instant results. They want to see something happen right away instead of waiting the course. And I think this report has done a good job of at least getting it into the discussion, and people are talking about it. And I think that there could be some minor adjustments over time. But I'm thinking, instead of the one quick fix, like 1 or 2 years of increasing the COLA, I think it's wiser to look at the long-term 7-year movement, so to speak. So I'm still listening. I'm taking notes, talking to people. I've talked to a number of city employees as well, and I really rely on their thoughts and ideas on all of this. My concern too is, and I'll probably be talking to Director Falls about this, but as far as what positions are open in all of the departments, and kind of seeing how some of this wage stuff over time, I think, has really affected that. So that'll be something that I'd like to see as well coming into budget, talking about that. But I think overall, I feel that Director Falls and the staff has done a nice job, a good job of at least getting this going. And I'll look forward to more discussion on it. That's what I have for now.
Thank you, Alder Stoyer. Alder Johnson?
Thank you, Joe. Just 2 more questions. One is, Mr. Berglund brought up the performance reviews and how they're conducted in December, and so that essentially staff would have to wait 11 months before an increase would kick in. Can you comment on that? Help us understand that.
Yeah, so in 2017, when we implemented the last pay structure, if I remember correctly, what occurred was, that was when the 2% COLA was usually around October, and I think they pushed it back, or it was a 2% either October or late November. So everyone got a COLA then, and then after the COLA, people were placed onto the new pay structure. And if you look at the distribution back then, 202 employees did not get an increase when they were placed on the structure. They got the COLA, and then they went on like a step that was where their wage was. So those employees at that time would get an annual increase every December. And I think part of it was the pay structure was implemented late in 2017 to help with that 2017 budget. And then the cost for 2018 would be a little less as well, because now performance evaluations are now really in December for a lot of people. So those employees that are still here from 2017, their annual performance evaluation date is still December. So that's why it hasn't changed. But for other employees that have, you know, if there's been turnover in positions, they keep their hire date, or maybe 6 months after that, depending where they get hired, as their performance evaluation date. So that's why there's employees waiting until December, because that's their annual review date.
So how many of those employees do we have?
I would
Still 200?
No, I don't believe so. It is a pretty big amount, but the number of employees that have that increase in December and are in the performance range is pretty low, I believe. So, I mean, if you make that change for those employees, which I wouldn't say I'm opposed to, you just have some other employees that are in the step increase that might be like, well, how come I'm not gonna change in that? So that's part of the reason why we're proposing to change the performance range performance range increase from 1% to 2% to help with that. And that's why also proposing the COLA earlier in the year will give employees a earlier raise, if that, and it's one of the options.
Yeah. Well, it just seems to me at the end of the day, right, no matter what decision we make, I mean, someone's not gonna get the same value impact, right? And so it just sort of becomes a discussion about, you know, how do we bring as many people along as possible, while maybe trying to find ways to mitigate those that are, I don't wanna say negatively impacted, but maybe aren't being adjusted the same, right? And I think, and I certainly don't want to speak for the folks that were up here sharing information with us, but I got the sense that leapfrogging was maybe one of the primary concerns. Could you maybe speak to that? Is there a way for us to mitigate that? Or do you feel that that's, if we adopt the plan, that's what comes with the plan? Like, is there a way?
I believe there's a way to do that. What I would like to focus on more for the budget is to focus on the plan itself. But I believe working with departments and specific positions with their 2024 budget, no matter how it's adopted, I think you could still work on the leapfrogging issue, because I don't think that's going to be a huge increase to overall cost. So I think things you could do is, based on seniority, have individuals with earlier performance review dates than less senior employees. I think that would be a way to fix it, and I don't think that would impact too many people, but it's not just the DPW labor positions, there's other positions across the board that would be impacted. But I think it can be done.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this, right? So I feel like even if you split these things into two discussion points, which is, there's the budget and the numbers and the financial piece of it, and we've got to figure that out so we can adopt a budget. But then there's the policy side of it, right? And in the policy side of it, it seems to me like we could address the performance reviews that happened in December. We could address the leapfrogging. We could address a number of things kind of in there. But if you don't have the funding in place, right? Like, I feel like that's the first step. Second step is sort of recalculating maybe any policy moves that could make this whole process fair for those that maybe aren't keeping pace with any adjustments.
Yeah, I can try and see how many people are impacted by the leapfrogging and get an estimate of what that cost would be with some proposed changes, and we can have that ready for joint finance personnel. And, yep.
Oh, yeah, I looked, the people that have a review date in December that are in the performance range is 63.
63, okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I think if you could get that number, Joe, for the leapfrogging as well.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. And of course, when you look at feedback, you commented that you felt, here are some of the concerns that have been coming up. Are there any other issues that have really been raised to you that are a consistent theme that we need to be aware of?
No, I think what I talked about and what they've talked about is pretty much the main concerns. I think the other one that I don't really see that can really be addressed a whole lot is when employees are placed on like the minimum step, whether it's 1 or 2, and then we have new hires coming in next year. I mean, that's going to be pretty hard to address. In the past, what we have done is we've looked at it very closely, and we've kind of ensured in certain positions that people didn't get leapfrogged when we've hired new hires. So if that comes up, we can always address it as well. So like if someone was on step 2, and we brought in someone, step 3, usually what we would do is move them both up to step 3, something like that.
Okay, so right now, though, the way that your proposal is submitted here, with that roughly $1.5 million impact, that is in aggregate again, right? But it is the cash equivalent of a 5%. It's just, it's being applied in different areas.
Yep, that's correct. And, I mean, the reason why it's being applied differently is because I guess if you look at the results of the distribution, there are going to be employees that are technically, based on the consultant, would be paid in the performance range next year, and some that are well below. So there's 158 employees out of 464 that if we implement this new pay plan at the 75th percentile, they're going to step 1 or the minimum step. So if you do a 5% across the board, that's 158 employees that are probably getting a pretty lower increase in comparison to the study.
Okay, and I think, again, that's gonna be a hard piece for us to solve tonight, but I think if we can get some of that data that we've asked for the joint personnel finance, I think it'll help us continue to guide that discussion.
And one thing that came up as well was the market review, you know, every 5 to 7 years, things like that. I mean, there's some municipalities that have market reviews on quicker timeframes. And when I met with DPW and Parks employees, what I explained was, you know, the best practice is to have a market review almost every 5 years, and then, you know, every maybe 10, 15 years have a internal review of your positions as well. And that's what we did in 2017. I think just because you're doing a review every 5 to 7 years doesn't mean that the recommendation would be a huge increase, and that's based upon what a lot of people have said. If the COLA maintains what other municipalities are doing, you can still do a market assessment, and they can come back and say, you're not far behind, or you're above, and that could be good news as well. And I'm not sure how much you pay for that, but I would assume the more often you do a market assessment, less work would be done on the consultant to update it.
Any other questions or comments? I'll entertain a motion. Alder Burnett?
Yeah, because it's in the budget, and I'm sure that we're gonna be debating it at the budget, I would just make a motion to refer to the Joint Personnel Finance Committee with no recommendation, and we take it up there.
Second that?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
One second. Aye. Could I just make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, just for those assembled, thank you all for attending sincerely. I think it's important when we make decisions that we hear from the people that it most impacts, and I think it probably is frustrating for you all to be here and then probably have us vote with no recommendation and just basically refer it. It's not because we're afraid to make a decision, it's just because it gives us the opportunity to address it at the Joint Finance and Personnel Committee, and we'll give it the proper attention that it requires. And this allows us to continue to engage with our staff and get more questions answered before we consider it at the Joint Finance and Personnel Committee. And then that is the body that you see here. The four of us make up that committee, and then that will be recommended to the full city council for our budget meeting, which will happen a little bit later in November. So apologize if you're gonna go away frustrated that we're not taking a stand, but I think you kind of know based on our questions and the way that we're deliberating it, that we're giving it the necessary thought. We just, in my opinion, don't have enough to make any changes because we're gonna be discussing it in a few weeks anyways.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that, great comments, Alder Burnett. Just to add to that, we really, because we don't have the authority to modify a budget proposal right now. We actually lack the authority even to make a substantive change to this. We can make a recommendation that says do this, but that's the same thing we're gonna hopefully deliberate at that joint personnel finance. So none of the timing of this changes. It all is still in the same timeline. And I think, I know a lot of the other members of council watch these meetings even if they're not here, so they're gonna hear all the same discussion and great comments from all of you too that spoke. So, same, thank you for being here.
I would add to that, it wasn't until you folks showed up at that meeting 2 weeks ago that there's been some real movement and action and change. And I think that speaks loudly to the fact that we do listen, but it speaks even louder to the fact that when you stand up for yourselves as a group, you're gonna get some action. And so I would recommend that, I know this is a pain to sit here. I know it was a worse pain last week, squeezed into that little room 2 weeks ago. But the more you stay involved, not just your reps do a great job, but everybody that can attend these meetings should attend these meetings to let the council know that you're there and that you're concerned and you're listening to what they have to say. I mean, this is not easy stuff to understand. I've been doing this for a few years, and I'm still learning every year that we go through this process. But I highly recommend if you can, if you have the time, and if you can make the effort, The more of you that show up, the more that people are gonna be listening to you. Thank you. All right. And with that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that passes. On to item number 3, for consideration with possible action on the 2024 City of Green Bay and City of Green Bay Firefighters Local 141, International Association of Firefighters AFL-CIO 158 Labor Agreement.
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
I gotta read, Bill. The committee may convene in closed session pursuant to 19.85, Section 1, subsection E, Wisconsin statute for purposes of deliberating or negotiating public employee contracts for competitive or bargaining reasons. The committee may thereafter reconvene in open session pursuant to Section 19.85, subsection 2, Wisconsin statutes, to report the results of the closed session and consider the balance of the agenda.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right.
Make a motion to return to regular order of business.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Move to direct staff to, motion for staff to proceed as directed in closed session.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. On to the informational. Anyone have any questions or concerns about report of routine personnel action items? Our next meeting is November 28th, 2023. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. We'll take a couple-minute break and get ready.